Hey guys, Jack Cypher here. Still sick unfortunately, but back here today with another One Piece video. Today we're going to be going over the Will of D. Everything that we know about it, some theories on what the D could stand for, the members that carry the Will of D, and just an overall explanation of everything that you need to know about the Clan of D. So, enough's enough, let's get into it. And we'll start off with the first time we really kind of get introduced to it in the series. Because obviously our MC, our main character, Monkey D. Luffy, has the initial in his name. Now, we don't learn, and correct me if I'm wrong here in the comments, we don't learn any other member possessing the D in their name until we get to Drum Island, ironically enough, considering I just did a video on that, and we get introduced to Kureha, and at the end of that arc, Dalton gives her Luffy's wanted poster, and Kureha sees the D in Luffy's name. And Kureha is a very interesting person to tell the audience more information on the letter D, because she's 140 years old. She's been around for over a century, so she's seen many different things. And it makes sense that she would have seen Gold Roger or Goldie Roger before the government tried to cover up everything. So she questions Dalton on it, and she's like, "Do you remember the pirate Goldie Roger?" And Dalton's like kind of looking at her a little bit confused, like, "You mean Gold Roger?" And Kureha's like, "Oh, is that what he's going by these days?" Well, what happens is that when you reach a certain level of infamy, the world government, the Gorosei, Summer, they decide that you can no longer have that D publicized to the world. So they wipe it. So Gold D Roger became just Gold Roger. Now, this brings up a lot of interesting things here, because what level of infamy do you need to get to? For instance, I thought Luffy, after all the events of Enies Lobby, would be certainly at least after Sabaody Archipelago and punching out Charlos and everything in Marineford, would have reached that level of infamy where the government's like, nah, we need to start wiping that D off of his wanted posters and not let the world catch on to another such prolific member of the Clan of D. But they don't. It takes Luffy activating Gear 5th and the Sun God Nika form for them to, call up the Marines and be like, stop printing the D in his name. Which is interesting, because the members that we do know that the government has covered up the initial D is, like we said, Gold D Roger, they made it Gold Roger. Rox D Zebek, he was just known as Rox on his wanted poster. So those are like the two big bad boys of the series, like quite possibly the two most powerful characters in all of One Piece has ever seen. Because Monkey D Garp, I don't think that they've covered up. I wouldn't see a reason why they would need to cover it up, but it does bring in my own theory here, so this is just my headcanon, so take it with a grain of salt. But I definitely do reckon that Monkey D Dragon, Luffy's father obviously, would only be known as Dragon. The reason I think this is because the Marines at Water 7, when Garp's telling Luffy his parentage, had never heard Dragon's full name before. So I reckon that's the Marine or the government covering that up. I mean, Dragon is the most wanted man of all time, so surely they would cover up the D in his name there. But Kureha tells Dalton that Chopper has joined a very interesting and dangerous man. Because like we said, she's been around for 140 years, so she's probably seen just what type of people those with the Will of D are. And the type of people that they are very... When someone has that initial, they're always known to the world. They're always getting up to deeds that shake the world to its core. Whether or not it's, waging war on the entire world government, whether or not it's being a notorious pirate, or on the flip side, whether or not it's being known as the great hero of the Marines. It's they're never just, you know, boring, average civilians on random islands type of thing. Having said that, Roger's or Ace's mother, Porcus D. Rouge, we don't know much about her. She very well could have just been an ordinary woman. I very much doubt that. I very much doubt that Roger kind of fell in love with just some no-name civilian. I imagine there was a lot more to her character than we just haven't seen yet, and probably won't see unless we get a full-on Roger flashback. But they've been known, those that carry the will of D, to be the enemies of God. Now, this is reference to the celestial dragons being referred to as gods in the One Piece world. And those with the will of D, not all the time mind you, but are often opposed to the world government, therefore are often opposed to the gods. And that's why they've earned that moniker of enemies of the gods. Now, it's not always the case, like we said. Monkey D. Garp, the greatest hero in Marine history, is a Vice Admiral of the Marines. Having said that, he does not like the Celestial Dragons, and the reason why he hasn't, been promoted to Admiral, Fleet Admiral, etc. even further, is because he doesn't want to be under their thumb. Being a Vice Admiral gives him more freedom. So even though he's on their side, he doesn't like their actions. The only other Marine that we've ever found out had the will of D, he's no longer a Marine anymore, but it's Jaguar D Soul, a giant, and the one that met up with Robin in O'Hara. So we'll touch on him a little bit when we talk about all the members of the will of D. But so we know that they're the enemies of God, like we were mentioning. They also have, like we said, they always are world-shaking figures in the One Piece world. They also always die with a smile on their face. At least from all the ones like we've seen. Roger died with a smile on his face. Luffy, in the very same spot where Roger was executed, when he thought he was going to die, had a smile on his face. This will be a good place to stop real quickly, guys, and just mention there will be spoilers for the most recent chapters of One Piece. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I would probably click off this video, catch up with it, and get back on. Because we recently found out that Clover, yes, the old Gramps from O'Hara, is Climb D Clover. He also had a brother that carried the will of D as well. We don't know if he died with a smile on his face, because we don't actually see his death scene. But people like Ace's mother, Rouge, she died with a smile on her face after giving birth to Ace, and Ace himself died with a smile on his face in his brother's arms. They're people, those of the clan of D, that are more than willing to accept fate and their death when it's brought upon them. They don't rage at the world for their demise or anything like that. They have a level of freedom and acceptance of their fate that makes most people envy with jealousy. Because dying, for a lot of people, is the most scariest thing in the world. And these are a group of people that have lived full lives. That's the thing about them. They live life to the fullest. And because they live like that, they can accept when it's time for them to die. It's a very beautiful trait that Oda has given them all. I absolutely love seeing... That makes me sound very much sadist, but in a tragic and beautiful way, I love seeing their death scenes because it's so inspirational, I guess you could say. But dying with a smile on your face brings up a very interesting character, because we have Marshall D. Teach, the main antagonist of One Piece, and he doesn't really live up to those traits. When he was in risk of being killed by Whitebeard, he was shitting his pants begging for his pops, his dad, not to kill him. He very much hasn't accepted his death if it were to happen. Now, by the time that he does die, or if he does die at the end of One Piece, he may have had some more development and may actually die with a smile on his face. But current day Blackbeard is very much the antithesis to a lot of the Will of D characteristics. Of course, he has some, like a world-shattering pirate that has been the first person ever to eat more than one devil fruit. Like, he is, in terms of, like, infamy, he's definitely up there as well. I'm surprised they haven't taken the D out of his name. You'd think that he would be at that level of infamy where that would be required as well. But yes, Blackbeard, and I reckon that's great writing because it just shows how opposite he is to our MC, to Luffy. Now, I've been speaking about the Will of D for a while here now, or the Clan of D. It's important to note that they're not all blood related. Now, of course, there are families like the Monkey family and the Porpoise family and stuff like that, but they don't all descend from one individual, at least from what we know of. It's very much implied that those that gathered in the ancient kingdom to fight against the 20 royal families were kind of given that initial because of them defying the 20 families going against them. And it's not something that I could be wrong here. Like, to be fair, it's never been stated otherwise. Oh, sorry guys. Like I said, I'm still really sick at the moment. But I don't personally believe that, say, Luffy and Blackbeard share blood. They definitely share characteristics of those, well, at least a few that Blackbeard possesses of the traits of the Will of D, and their ancestors may have been allies. Blackbeard was probably a poor example. Let's say Luffy and Ace. Their ancestors definitely may have been allies back in the day, and I very much strongly reckon that that's been implied. You could say that maybe Blackbeard's ancestors were potentially betrayed Joy Boy. We really don't know. That's what I mean by, like, when the Void Sentry's found out, we're definitely going to find out about the Will of D. And I reckon the Void Sentry is going to be found out when we get to Laugh Tale. Because, well, before we get into Laugh Tale, it's important to know, Joy Boy, he's kind of like the big daddy hero from the Void Sentry. And we don't know if he has the D in his name. We don't even know if Joy Boy is his proper name. I've always found that name to be very, very odd. But that's something that we'll probably find out in the future. I would be very shocked if he didn't possess the Will of D. And as we're talking about Joy Boy, we might as well mention her here. The oldest known confirmed member with the Will of D that we know of is Nefertari D. Lily. If that name sounds familiar, you're right. VV Nefertari, Cobra Nefertari, they might not be aware of it, but they possess the Will of D as well. Now, Lily Nefertari is, like I said, this is more headcanon-y, but seemed to have been on the Ancient Kingdom side, because from what we know of, all the Ds were. But for whatever happened, she seems to have gone over to the other side. Because we know that the Nefertari family is considered one of the 20 royal families. Now, it could have been the opposite, because like I said, I don't think any of this has ever actually truly been confirmed. It could have just been she was part of the 20 families and joined the other side. But from memory, I believe it was implied to be the other way around. Because a lot of people run with the theory that Lily could potentially be Aim Summer. That would be a very, very interesting twist. I don't hold too much stock in it yet. I need to, there'd need to be more hints for me to kind of go down that route. But Lily was the oldest known Will of D member, or Clan of D, that we know of so far. But we got to hear, they're talking in circles, Jack. We got here because we mentioned Laugh Tale. The reason I wanted to bring this Laugh Tale up is because the Roger Pirates found Laugh Tale, like we all know, and they found out the truth of the Void Sentry, and they found out what the Will of D means. That makes them the only people, other than, like, say, the Gorosei and stuff like that, that have confirmation on what happened back then and the Will of D, making Roger the only confirmed member of the clan of D that knows what the D stands for. This is important. Let's go over who does know. So obviously, the Gorosei would know, Eam would know, Roger and the Roger Pirates knew, Roger told Whitebeard, so Whitebeard knows. Now, the next couple are just me speculating on it. Sengoku, former fleet admiral, definitely knows something. We don't exactly know how much he knows, but he definitely knows more than an average person about it. Even more than people like Robin and stuff like that. Because he does talk to Law, once again, Trafalgar D. Waterlaw, about the will of D, and that Corazon wouldn't have known what the D stood for. But he monologues about the D stirring chaos in the world again. So I definitely reckon he would know something. And I'd also speculate that Garp and Dragon probably know a little bit as well. They wouldn't have any true information on it at all. Like, once again, this is entirely just me speculating in all of my own headcanon. It wouldn't surprise me if Roger even told Garp. You know how they had their scenes in like the prison cells and stuff like that. Garp was his greatest rival, and they had a friendship. Like, he left his son in Garp's hands. I wouldn't surprise me if Roger did tell Garp. But once again, that's just all my headcanon. So, that goes over kind of everyone that knows about the Will of D, which isn't many people whatsoever. But let's go into all the Will of D members while we're touching on this. Now, there's 15 total confirmed Will of D members, and we'll quickly go over them all. We've got the Monkey family. We've got Monkey D. Garp, Monkey D. Dragon, and Monkey D. Luffy. All three of them, out of all the Will of Ds, they would be probably the top 5 most infamous / famous ones. We've got Garp, the greatest hero in the Marines. We've got Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army and the most wanted man in the world. And we have Luffy, a current Yonko, said to be kind of the next Joy Boy, the person that wields the Sun God Nika fruit. Those three are definitely up there with the most famous. You also have Goldie Roger, Rox D. Zebek, and Marshall D. Teach. Those would be the other three that are the most famous. Obviously, Roger and Rox were the two most famous pirates of their time. And Blackbeard, like we said, is the first person ever to eat more than one devil fruit, and is a current Yonko as well. So those would definitely be the 6 most famous. We have Roger's wife, Porcus D. Rouge, and her son, Luffy's adoptive brother. Oh, sorry, guys. Porcus D. Ace. Now, we know Ace and his trouble with his own lineage and coming to acceptance with that, taking on his mother's name instead of his father's. But from what we know of so far, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I think Ace is the only person we've seen that's been born from 2 members carrying the Will of D. Now, who knows? Luffy's mother may have carried the Will of D. I know a lot of people think she may have been something like a celestial dragon. I kind of like that theory. It would give Dragon a lot of reasoning about why he's so against the world government, but that's for another time. I believe Ace is the only one that we know of that is born from 2 members that possess the Will of D. But that makes 8 characters we've gone over. Let's go over a couple of more. We've got Trafalgar D. Waterlaw, former warlord of the sea, an ally to Luffy. We have Jaguar D. Soul, the only giant that's confirmed to possess the Will of D. But we know that Joy Boy was a giant, so it's very possible that there are other giants that carry that initial. That makes 10. There is the Nefertari family. So we have Lily D. Nefertari, and even though they've never been mentioned on screen to have it, they would possess it. Cobra D. Nefertari and VVD Nefertari. And that leaves us with two others, and they're the ones we touched on earlier that have just been revealed. Climb D. Clover and his older brother that is currently nameless. But those are the 15 members that hold the will of D. And it definitely isn't many. Because, like, the monkey family is, you could kind of consider as one. Same with the Porcus and Nefertari family. Like, we have, like, in terms of just families, there's a lot less than 15. Off the top of my head, I imagine it'd be like 8 or 10 or something like that. So there aren't too many families we've seen so far that possess the will of D. But each member we've seen have lived very, very lively and fulfilled lives and accomplished great, great deeds and have just been renowned to the world. And those that we haven't seen that died with a smile on their face, I could very much believe that they did. But that gets us to, we'll get onto the theories of what the D could stand for in a second. There's one more thing I want to go over before we get to that, and that is a lot of good foreshadowing from Oda, from Skypiea. Lots of foreshadowing went on in Skypiea. I feel so validated of my love of that arc now. I was loving that arc 10 years ago where people were shitting on it. It's very much a joy. It's like loving the prequels of the Star Wars movies, and only now everyone comes around to it, but whatever. That's also a discussion for another day. But in Skypiea, Luffy literally has, we know that the Will of D members are enemies of God, and who does Luffy fight? Enaru, or Enel, depending on your pronunciation of it, who calls himself God. What does Nami say about Luffy? He's Enaru's, he's God's natural enemy. Now, she was saying this because Luffy's powers at the time, we believe, were just rubber, and Enaru's was lightning. So obviously Luffy negated Enaru's power. But that was great foreshadowing on Oda's part. He deserves all the flowers for that he gets, because it was just great writing. And that pretty much wraps up everything that we know so far about the Will of D. When I had this topic on my notes about things to talk about, I'm thinking, this is probably going to be an hour-long video. But there actually isn't much information that we do know about the Will of D, despite it being such a big topic. It's kind of insane. But let's quickly go over, to end this video out, some of the theories on what the Will of D can stand for. Because it's an initial. We've always kind of assumed that D stands for, the rest of a word. But, to be fair, I believe that's just fan speculation. It could just be D, and the meaning could just mean, something completely different, regardless of the D. But I do reckon that the D is going to stand for something. Now, there are 4 words that I've often heard from other people, felt myself, that correlated the best to what the Will of D would be. Before we get into the 4 words, I will say, for not the longest time, but way back in the day, people thought it was D because of the members dying with a smile on their face. And, a D turned sideways is, reminiscent of someone laughing. I don't reckon it's going to be that. That's just a very cute little coincidence in my mind. But the 4 words that I reckon are best suited to the D, and I want you guys to list all of your ones down in the comments that I haven't mentioned here. But 1 is destiny. Now, destiny plays a big part in One Piece. Destiny/fate. The other one I'm going to get into as well, and we'll touch on both of them more, is dreams. Those are the 2 probably most likely ones, but because they're so likely, I reckon Oda probably won't go down that route. It's destiny because every member that has a Will of D does such major things in their life that it's like they're fulfilling their destiny. And dreams because they all have very big dreams that they're striving for. So those two make a lot of sense into why that's what they could mean. Like, they would fit perfectly with someone like Luffy. You could definitely see that. Specifically the Dreams one. Dreams is probably my favorite out of all of them. But some of the other ones, the other two, demon or like demons, it could mean that for their position of enemies of gods, they may have been referred to as like demons back in the day. And, you know, demons being shortened to D is where it's come from. On, I will mention a fifth one actually, because it could also be devil for devil fruits. It could have been the clan of D that brought the devil fruits into existence. Whether or not they brought them into existence, or they're the ones that found them and brought them to light in that current day world, it could have been something along those lines. But the fifth one is death. And it's death because, as we know, each member has deaths that they're all content with. They all die with a smile on their face. They all live their lives to the fullest and have very iconic and noteworthy deaths. So I reckon those are probably the five most common and realistic, just straight words that the D could stand for. But like I said, let me know down in the comments if you think that the Will of D stands for one of those words, or if it stands for something else that I didn't mention. But that's pretty much everything about the Will of D that we've learnt about so far. It's infuriatingly not much for something that's such an important part of the One Piece world. Oda is such a bastard for teasing us all with this. It is one of the most tantalizing mysteries in all of fiction, and I cannot wait to find out what it means. We all know that Luffy, when he finds out, he's gonna be, well, whatever, like, I don't care, because that's just what Luffy's character is. But us, as a viewer base, is just waiting on bated breath about what this D stands for. Whether or not it stands for a word, or whether or not it's just some sort of meaning and D's being given to them. I just cannot wait to find out more about it. But it's a bit of a shorter one today. I did say my last video was going to be short. It ended up being goddamn 40 minutes. I don't know how I got through that one with how I was feeling yesterday. But that's everything for today's video. I've been Jack Cypher. It has been my pleasure deciphering everything that we know about the Will of D. Have a lovely day, peeps. Jack Cypher out.